You are listening to the People Centric Podcast, where we talk through the toughest challenges that people face at work and give practical advice to fixing those challenges. Thanks for joining our movement to create workplaces that are happier, healthier, aligned, and empowered by putting people at the center of all that we do.
Hey, People Centric leaders. This is Stephanie Anderson, and welcome to another episode of the People Centric Podcast. We're excited to talk about this topic today because it's something that we see happen all the time in our work, and we see it across lots of organizations. So hopefully this is going to be relatable for you. So our topic today is giving voices to those who are generally overlooked. So I've got our team here. I'm going to introduce them real quick, and then we will jump into this topic. But first, we've got Diana Royalty with us today. Hi, Diana.
Hi, friends. Good to be with you today.
And Philip Herzog.
I'm usually overlooked, so I appreciate that you know.
Oh no!
Well, and no, I don't want
I
you
thought
to
of
feel
just
that
staying
way.
silent to make a point for this podcast, but you
Oh
called
my
me out.
gosh. Yes. That's so funny. That's so funny. I'm probably the one that's talking over Philip, and I will own that.
Oh no.
No, it was really a joke. It wasn't meant to be more. But there have been times I actually grew up as a shy kid. This was not the story, but
Me
I grew up
too.
so shy. And Diana,
Really?
Me too.
when we moved to Springfield, the class I was in for 2 months thought I had a speech impediment or something that was embarrassing, which is why I never talked to them for 2 months straight. And so at my little classification talk for Rotary, I shared that, and someone just said, "How did you get unshy?" And I was like, I just started embracing the awkward, like foot in mouth, and I got over that. So I experienced that a lot. Diana, how did you become who you are? Still shy, but
I
outgoing.
was shy for a long time. I was still shy into like age 15. And I started working at a video store. This is how old I am. Video stores existed. I worked at Hollywood Video. And I had to greet people as they came in. And I thought it was the most awkward thing in the whole world. I had to be like, "Hi, welcome to Hollywood Video." And I hated it, and it made me itchy on the inside, and it was awkward. And then I had to check out people and be like, "Oh, this is a great movie." And then people came and asked me questions about movies, and I had to talk to them. And I hated all of that. But the thing that really brought me out of my shell was that there was a competition on who could sell the most things. And my competition won over the shyness.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Mhm.
Wow. Well,
Well, and Stephanie, since we both shared, you were born selling and an entrepreneur.
I love your stories, and I do not relate to them. I was born loud, and yeah, I can just remember as a kid always like I don't know where it came from genuinely, but I was pretty fearless as a child, and I would talk to anyone, anywhere, anytime, and they'd be like, "Oh, you want to be like, who would like to be the lead in the church pageant?" And like my hand is up first. Please make me the center of attention. My dad used to say to me as a kid, like, "Stephanie, shyness has never been your problem," which is a real slam.
It's true.
But so I've had to adjust the dial the other direction a little bit and learn to tone it down sometimes because I'm always the one talking.
But even though you're not shy, have you ever been in a situation where you have felt overlooked? Our topic today. Have you ever?
Oh, for sure. For
Okay,
sure.
okay. So
And
it is kind of
yeah,
universal.
it is universal because one thing a leader said to me once, so it just wasn't great advice, but there was some truth in it, was like, there's always going to be someone more dominant than you. So you can't like just try to out dominate everybody.
I would have been
Which,
like, challenge accepted.
well, that's kind of what I thought in my head of like,
Uh,
I think you're wrong because I think I'm delusional and I could do anything. But bad advice, but there was a grain of truth in it, is that I think there are people who I think are just generally willing to push their ideas forward, and you'll probably find a moment in your life where you are feeling like you're not being heard. Or I've been told, like, going to a meeting, well, and this was early on in my career, of like, now you just sit back and I'll handle this, right? And I'm like, oh, like I had ideas prepared and things to talk about with this group, and you're just taking over this meeting, vigilante style, right, as it's beginning. And so yeah, I think that's why I like this topic, because it does feel so universal, whether you are a little more shy or introverted, or you are more extroverted, you're comfortable like speaking in front of people or speaking up in a meeting. It's happened to all of us. And we see this a lot of, like, when we're leading teams, or in leadership meetings or step team projects. If you've worked with us, you know how those work. And what we see happen a lot is that generally, the more confident voices kind of get more in those meetings, because they are speaking up more often. They're generally putting more out there in the meeting. They're sharing more ideas. And even what research tells us is that generally the loudest voices in the room tend to get their ideas heard more, and they tend to accomplish more. But the pitfall of that, and that's what we're going to talk about today, is that doesn't always mean they had the best idea. And so how do you balance this on your teams or in your organizations or for yourself, and make sure, like, the right voices are heard and that we actually are getting to the best ideas? And so maybe let's come back to personal experience. So when we've all experienced this before in a meeting, and it just feels like there's either someone else or multiple people that are just there, the loud voice in the room or in this meeting, and we feel like you can't speak up or you can't get a word in edgewise. What do you do?
I mean, I think this happens to me fairly regularly, not because of any bad thing, but because I'm a processor and I just need like a minute. I just need a minute to think through things. And I also see, I'm doing it right now. I'm pausing. I also know that words carry a lot of weight, and I'm very intentional with the words that I say. And when I'm not, I end up saying something ridiculous. So I always am like very careful and cautious when I speak, and I'm processing at the same time. So I think there are a lot of moments in my career and in my life where I just didn't have enough time to process the information, and someone else got something out first, and everybody kind of ran with it. And by the time I was like ready and knew I had a better solution or a better answer or a better question to ask, we were already too far down the road of the other thing. And so then I was like, well, do I throw a wrench in everything and set everything off track? Or do I just sit here with this? Do I wait for a moment? Do I speak up? And so I think I have felt this many, many times just because of how my brain works. It's not because anybody had ill intent or anything. It's just that's kind of how my brain works.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you said that. And I liked the word that you used of like being a processor, because there are some of us who are more processors, and we need time maybe away from that moment to think about something and to process an idea and to do that maybe quietly with ourselves. And there are others of us that, like, we're comfortable making quicker decisions in the moment, or we go with a little more of that gut instinct, like, for better or for worse sometimes. And I see that a lot, that it's often the processors who you're not hearing from in these meetings. And a lot of it is because we've set up these meetings in a way that actually doesn't give people time to think about things. It forces them to make fast decisions. And I think we've done a podcast episode on this before, of like, there is value in slowing down sometimes and taking time to make a decision or respond to a message or something. Because yeah, the first idea or the loudest idea, it might work, but is that really our best? not just in terms of ideas, but like our best as a company, or would it benefit us to slow down and think about things? I'll say I'm a little more in the camp of like I'm comfortable making quick decisions, and I've had to work and kind of train myself to slow down and do it, because what I found on the opposite end of the spectrum is then I'm getting volunteered to lead all of the things and do all of the stuff. And while it does stroke the ego a little bit, I would find myself getting really overwhelmed. And I have burnt out at jobs before because it was like there's too much on my plate. And I would start feeling resentful of my team, and realizing, yes, there's a part of that disaster that I made and I need to own. But there's also another piece of it that, like, I don't know that we're doing this well as an organization, that everything is just going back to the person who said it first or was willing to talk about it.
Yeah. I I remember one time Dawn looking at me and being like, "Can you just think out loud?" Because I'm an internal thinker. Dawn's a verbal processor. And so I was like, "Well, yeah, I can tell you what's in my head, but like it's it's going faster and there's more questions and there's more stuff than I'm going to be able to get out." And he was like, "Just say it." And so I started saying all the things that were running through my head, and he was like, "Oh my God, that's a lot of stuff." Because I go from like big picture to every tiny little detail, and it's just all the things in between and all the questions that I have and all the things that need to get done. And I think that's what's happening when people are processing without being verbal. There are verbal processors who need to talk it through, but I think the quiet ones are usually just like thinking through all the things and just need a little bit of a minute to do that.
I love that example. In our household, in the Herzog household, we talk about how many trains are on the track. And my wife and I are maybe, we diverge. Claire is much more a processor than I am. I'm just an out loud, but also internal processor. And I may be similar. I don't think anyone on our team is bad at talking or bad at generating ideas. That's like what we do. And what a gift it is to do that with people. But I think one of the things that often stops me is kind of a mix of all the things you guys have spoken about, where I'm like, man, if I want to speak, I want to make it worthwhile, usually. That same point, Dan, I love how your fear is like, oh gosh, because if you throw the wrench, which is a great fear and one that a lot of people probably have. And also the challenge is like, well, what if like someone is talking about an idea and it's a good B+ idea or an A- idea, but we come up with like the great idea. Isn't it worth the trade? And so not that you do that every time, but I think sometimes what can happen, or the opposite, if you're a dominant voice and you're used to being the one that talks loud and proud and you don't have an idea, then you're like, crap, like, a lot of this is kind of just the basic small group theory. Everyone plays a role, and when you change that, there's fear with that. So if I'm the one always with the great ideas, but I don't have one and I'm loud, I'm just gonna say something because I know the people, they look to me, right? They look to me for the ideas. And what I love is that some of what we're talking about, and Stephanie, not to pick on your first quote even, but that quote about dominance, which like that's a powerful statement that was said. But it feels like in that setting, and that quote really speaks more to like who has the most power in the room to push and pull. Where I love that we talk about influence, which is really how do we invite and open the door. And there are roles, is hierarchy, but I think for quiet folk, maybe that's a question I always have too. Like, how do you guys specifically lean into supporting processors or the quiet person? Or how do we functionally make space for people who do struggle, who aren't the loud and proud at first every time?
Yeah, yeah, that's a wonderful question, because you're right of like, I think the natural instinct we see from most people is when they, maybe now we see it, right? We see that there are people whose voices are not being heard. We see that there are processors who maybe have great ideas that aren't getting brought to the table, or maybe honestly, genuinely, we see people getting walked all over, right? Or we see just dominant people driving everything, and we don't like that in our team or in our culture. the natural instinct that I think we tend to see is in that people just apply that because that's an uncomfortable feeling. It's an uncomfortable feeling to realize maybe as a team or an organization, we have been like keeping people silent on our team and we've not been giving space. So I think the natural instinct I usually see is then people, I'll just want to turn the spotlight right on that problem and right on that person. And we often act as facilitators in our role and we'll help lead meetings for our clients and in organizations. And it's not uncommon at all for somebody to come to us at some point and say, this person and this person haven't spoken at all. And what are you going to do about it? And it's like coming to the facilitator to say, like, what I think the answer they want from us is that then we're going to turn in the next moment and go, Diana, Phillip, you haven't said anything yet. What do you think? And from what I have observed for people in my life, because mostly my husband is also an internal processor. He needs time to think about things. He hates being put on the spot to come up with like an idea in that moment because he's like, well, I may not have all of the information yet. So I need you to keep talking so that way I can continue to think about it. And he's told me before, like that is such an uncomfortable moment because it then puts me on the spot because then, yeah, to your point, Phillip, what if I don't have an idea or what if I don't have a thought or what if I'm generally like, I agree with everything that's been said in the room. So how can we do that better? And it's not to say that that's never the right thing to do because I think there are moments where if we genuinely realize someone's been trying to speak up and they're being talked over, or they're being constantly interrupted, it can be good to turn and just say, "Hey, Phillip, I've noticed that you've raised your hand a couple times and we haven't gotten to you yet. I'd love to pause really quick and hear what you would have to say. But what if, yeah, we just observe somebody like they're just kind of nodding or they're just taking notes, but they've not verbally said anything. What's the right way if you're the leader in that moment to call attention to that without just like turning a really awkward spotlight on somebody?
I think that you guys do a great job for me because you all know that I'm a processor and you all know that like I'm thinking a lot about everything that's being said. But it's really often that you guys will look at me and be like, Diana, your face says that you have things in your brain. I must have a very expressive face because I do things like the raised eyebrow, like this is crazy, or the gross, I don't like this face. So yeah, you guys are really good at being like, I think you have something to say. You don't have to have full thoughts yet, but what are you thinking right now? And just saying, what are you thinking right now, not making me have to give something else does allow me to be like, okay, I like where we're going. I like the discussion, but here are my questions. Or I love this thing. Here's what I'm concerned about. Or I was sort of thinking it might go this direction and it's gone this direction. And you guys are just really good at saying, just tell us what you're thinking. And there's no pressure. And are you okay with where we're at? And, like you guys just ask good questions instead of demanding something from me. You ask a really good question of me.
I like how your example, it's kind of an on the way question. So it's not waiting till the end where it's like, all right, here's our next steps. And all right, you do this, you do that. Anybody have anything else to add? Because at that point, it's like, well, no, I definitely won't. Because, yeah, so on the way, like checking in with the processor of like, hey, like, what do you think? And how is this? I think one of the things we try to do too when we facilitate with a group, to that pause point that you guys made earlier, is just to then pause the group and say, let's take a minute. I found that a minute is the perfect amount of time to do anything. So like a minute, let's just like everyone take a minute. You can write it down on your phone, on your notes, whatever, but like just to have a second, because I think sometimes a processor then is like, oh, I can look at my notes. And then after that minute of like, okay, so I'm super curious for anyone who hasn't shared an idea yet who really wants to, what do you think? And it's a gentle way of telling someone if you've been talking a lot, don't talk yet. And if you haven't talked yet, you can. I think, Steph, you shared like with other I think common one we see is a leader or a group who's pretty bold on one thing, and maybe that quieter person starts to speak. Oh, hey, well, here's my idea, and I think, and then they're interrupted. the walking over, where people are like, no, haven't tried, no, tried that, blah, blah, and they literally did not share their point. And in that setting, I always like to be like, okay, yeah, hey, good, great points, but hey, did we hear your whole thoughts? Can you finish? What else were you saying? It sounded like were you saying this? What were you saying? And I think having someone else just validate, hey, you had a full thought that was cut in half. What's the whole part of that? I think those are a few things that help as well.
I love that you said that. Yeah, as someone who is a chronic interrupter, because I grew up in a family where everyone just talked over each other, and I didn't know that wasn't normal until I really got into the workplace. Yeah, it's really important to circle back, to use a funny corporate word, but to come back around to that person and say like, hey, did we hear your whole thought? What else did we miss? And I also liked what you said, Philip, of like, yeah, I think usually people save their questions if they're facilitating a meeting till the very end, and they just say, is there anything else that we didn't talk about? Is there anyone else that we haven't heard from? And what's interesting is there has been some research done just even on that specific language shuts down people from speaking more. Because when you say anything else or anyone else, it creates this paradigm that I have to have something like exceptional to add to this versus maybe just another thought or another comment. And so if you hear yourself using those, like, because it is a little more extreme, anything else, anyone else, training yourself to say, well, what else? What else do we need to talk about before we, end this meeting today? And even saying that before we end it kind of gets people to like not, but just what else do we need to talk about? What else haven't we talked about? Right? Using that, I think is really powerful. The other thing that I was thinking about that can be powerful is like, what about the conversations that maybe need to happen outside of these moments? Because we've been talking about like if you're in the moment and you're noticing someone's not being heard, or there may be some louder voices that are dominating the conversation, what can you do in that moment? But I think there also can be the right call to like not do that in the moment and have a conversation after the fact. And I think there's things you can do to have a conversation with like that quiet person and maybe pulling them aside, but also that loud person if you have somebody on your team that's dominating the conversation. So what advice would we give people? Maybe we'll start with the quiet person. Like if we consistently notice someone is not speaking up in a meeting, or they're not being heard, or they're getting interrupted, or their ideas are being stepped on, and we recognize maybe it's not right to do this in front of everyone during the meeting. We know it would make them super uncomfortable for us to call them out. What could that conversation sound like if we decided to pull that person aside privately?
I love this question. And I think there's validity to having that conversation after, but also a conversation before. Don does a really good job of being like, Diana, in this meeting, I would love it if you would, and then he gives me a role, right? Like if you would ask some deep questions about the process, get into the details, show us the weeds, right? He'll say like, I would love it if you would do this during this meeting. And it does give my brain a new frame of reference, right? He's not looking for me to throw out the biggest ideas or to whatever. He's looking for me to be the detail person and do what I'm exceptionally good at. So I love that he does that sometimes. I also think that going into the meeting, we state what the goal of the meeting is. And we're not going to finish the project in this meeting, right? This little bit of this meeting is for brainstorming. And then after that, we're going to go into creating. And then after that, we're going to whatever. But like stating very clearly what the purpose of the meeting is really helps us processors and us like quiet ones so that we know what role we're supposed to play and where this is all going. Because I think we get I do anyway, I get in this like weird space of like, I figure all of this out and there's 35 different ideas. And now I have to go run down 35 different ways and I just get stuck in all of it. But if I know that we are not solving the world's problems in this meeting and that we are just throwing things out there, then it gives me grace to just sort of relax a little bit and be like, okay, now I can throw out some ideas and I don't have to worry about, are they good or do I have to run down and solve all of these problems, right? there's some pre-meeting stuff that I think is really powerful to do. And I think Dawn has also gone to people and been like, hey, in this meeting, I would love for you to give only 5 ideas. Just give 5, your 5 best ones. Don't give 25, just give 5. And kind of bring some of those more gregarious people out and just sort of say, like, just do a fraction of what you've been doing. You're great at that, but let's just do this. And so I think some of that pre-meeting coaching is so valuable.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I think I've seen that be really effective to like, yeah, let's prepare everyone for this meeting so that they can come prepared, right? Like, and our processors really need that. Like, in addition to not like surprising them in the middle of the meeting, don't surprise them with a meeting where they can't come prepared for it. Another thing I thought was when we're facilitating, especially if it's like a conference or a longer day, team retreat, strategic planning, we'll also often have people come up to us during a break, maybe some of the quiet people, and they'll share an idea like one-on-one that maybe just they don't feel comfortable speaking up in front of the group, or they have a fear of public speaking. And so that just feels scary. And they'll like bring an idea to us. And what I've seen our team do well is we'll actually say to that person, like, I think that's great. Would you be comfortable saying that when we come back? Like, if I kick us back off, would you be comfortable me saying, hey, Diana and I actually had a really interesting conversation over lunch. And Diana, I'd love you to share with the group like what you're thinking about right now, and just asking that question, like, are you comfortable with that when we come back from this break or in the next meeting? Or would you feel comfortable sending a follow-up email to the team sharing this, and you can tell them like you and I talked about this? But just asking that too, because I think, yeah, I've seen that a lot of like people will come after a meeting and share something, and then the rest of the group didn't hear it, and you're like, that would be great to do. Um,
Yeah, that's a great point. Last week I was with a group where that exact same thing happened. And so, great idea. Do you mind if we put this on the whiteboard when we start? And then it's like up there with all the other great ideas. I was like, that's superb. And then let's kick off. This is how we're going to start. And I'll lean on you to help tell the story, like why this matters. Knock on your buddies next to you, make sure they're ready, Okay, youth people. It was a whole division that had been quiet the entire time until a break. And so I think that's the other thing. I think it's really easy. We talk about stories a lot too. Again, for people to fall into the story of like, oh, that's Stephanie. She'll volunteer. Or like, oh, that's Diana. She has all these ideas and she can't talk to us because she's thinking too hard. And I think there are groups where people come, and that's not a hospitable way to host a meeting, right? Like, if you had people coming to your home and you knew they had different needs or different thoughts, you're not like, yeah, you're gluten free. Here's a bunch of bread with gluten and pasta with red sauce that you're allergic to. Like, that is not a great way to set the table. And I think a lot of this is just like truly setting the table so that everyone can participate and make it worthwhile.
I love that so much. Yeah. And I do think those stories about people perpetuate people doing the same things over and over, right? So if like Stephanie, if we were like, Stephanie, you go, you start this meeting, you go, give us all your ideas, you would do that for the whole meeting, right? Like you would
yeah.
just keep
And like
going.
with very good intent,
Totally.
right? Yeah.
Totally.
Cause I'm like, I
Yes.
want to help our team. I want to do the right things.
Yes. And if every time I spoke up, someone spoke over me or I was ignored or I felt like it wasn't looked at valuably, then I'm not going to speak anymore. Like it perpetuates that thing, whatever it is, it perpetuates it. So I love thinking about how do we support each person in the meeting and how do we get them to do their very best and use their strengths in each meeting. I think that's so cool.
Mhm. That is really powerful. That idea of like, let's not typecast people in this too. And that's definitely not the point of this episode, is like, who on your team is the gregarious, loud ideas person, and who are the quiet other people. And it's the same reason why I think like, um, we don't always like the idea of introverts and extroverts, because while I think there is a lot of truth to that, it does type people. And what we know about people is we're all really complex and unique and wonderful. And like we all are, right? And so like I love that you said that, Philip, of like, let's be careful not to typecast people. Because I mean, there are days where even for me as the more extroverted person that I would like just to listen and be quiet because maybe we're talking about something that I don't know about, or I've never like waded in these waters before. I've never tried or I've never done this before. And I want to just sit back and I want to listen and I want to observe. I want to learn from other people. And so, yeah, it's equally uncomfortable for me when I'm like having one of those more introverted days that somebody's like, Stephanie, you haven't talked and you always have ideas. Like, what are you thinking about? Like I think that's just generally uncomfortable for most people. And it's because we've typed them instead of saying we're all human beings and we probably all have some days where we feel more comfortable or confident speaking up or sharing something. Some days we have a lot of ideas and some days we may not have a lot of ideas to add. Maybe just we want to learn or we are just saying like, I know I'm processing this. I'm thinking about it. I'll come back around later. Um, but let's talk about, let's say you've noticed this on your team and you do notice that maybe there is a someone or someones who are generally speaking up more, and maybe that is hindering group discussion. And actually, what we'll see often happens is we create echo chambers or where it feels like, hey, there's one person's ideas and ways that we kind of go with, and they may not even be bad or wrong ideas, but it just feels like that person is starting to dominate those conversations, whether it's intentionally or unintentionally. So how do we talk to maybe that person who is the more assertive?
Yeah. I mean, I don't necessarily I don't necessarily have the answer. However, I think that if there were someone like that on our team, I probably go to them one on one and be like, hey, can you just tell me some of your ideas early so that I can process through that? And just ask them. And the gregarious people are always going to tell you. They're not going to hoard that information. They're going to share it with you. And that would help me figure out to think through it earlier, right? That would help me process earlier and spin a little earlier. I also think that if you could get the gregarious people to be on your side a little bit and call you out, like if Stephanie, if I was like, hey, tell me some of your ideas, let me think through it. I bet in the next meeting you'd be like, Diana, did you think about some of these? What are you thinking? Like, and I love the idea of collaborating together because I think the quiet one and the more outspoken one are going to be such a great team together. But if they're not working together, you're never going to know that.
I love that. And I would say for me, that's been what's most effective is actually give me a role in the meeting.
Yeah.
And like help me understand what my role is in the meeting. Like if you see me just dominating the conversation or interrupting people because I'm excited about it's usually because I'm excited about my ideas. So I would say like, yes, like give me a place for my ideas, but then give me a role in the meeting and remind me like, hey, you are a leader. And so part of your role and what I want you to do is actually like collect all of the ideas. So I know you're collecting yours, but in the next meeting, can you make sure we collect all of the ideas, and that we've heard from different people. And I'm specifically curious to know what this team thinks. So can you help me draw that out in the next meeting? And I think that's great coaching for that person because I will tell you, and again, you look back at your younger self and you're like, wow, yeah, there were a lot of things I did I'm proud of, and I have grown a lot since then too. And I can say like I've had moments where like a leader it just felt like my hand was slapped. And it didn't help me. It just shamed me for how I was showing up in that meeting and honestly just made me feel bad. And then I would go around and apologize to people because I'm also a secret softie. If you don't know this about me. And I literally remember one time like a leader came down really hard on me because I had spoken too much in a meeting. I had dominated the conversation, but they really slapped my hand hard. I felt really bad about it. And I went around and started apologizing to people on our team because I felt terrible. And they were like, what are you talking about? Like, what are you doing? Like, yeah, Stephanie, we could just tell you were really passionate about this. And they were all really kind about it, which was so nice. Um, so I'd say, like, don't try to match that assertiveness of that person. Like, that's probably not the right move. Like, give them a role. Um, Help direct that passion and energy somewhere. And now that's not to say that you can never have the conversation of like, hey, you need to back off, right? And we extroverts and assertive people need to hear that from time to time, but I would say like if what they're bringing to the table is still constructive and helpful, but you just see where like they're taking up a lot of space in the meeting, give them a role in the meeting, ask them to help you like bring other ideas to the table, ask them to help you engage these other teams and like remind them like it's our plate. We're all a part of this team. We actually can't accomplish this idea if this group is not bought in and they're not sharing their ideas and perspectives. So like help me in that next meeting make sure we get that.
Diana's point was so good too. She took it a different direction than I thought she would. I thought she was going to say before the meeting as a processor for the gregarious person, meet with them. And I thought you were going to say, and like, have you ever heard of smooth move tea or something? Like an hour before, give them a tea, make sure they like can't be in the room, make sure they have to leave. Like if they're so difficult, you talk to them, like plot
Ew,
and ploy.
Phillips.
But that's really strategic, but I thought but you one upped. That was so much better what you said of like engage them, turn them on your side. Stephanie, your points are so
Yeah.
don't use biology to sabotage them.
Yeah, I'm so
Please, we
curious
talk about
why your
ideas.
first thought was like sabotage them, mess up their calendar, get them
Yeah,
so
that's
they
right.
can't attend
Oh,
the
I'm sorry. I
meeting.
thought I invited
Oh
you to
my
the meeting. Oh
gosh.
my gosh, I didn't know that your car was on fire.
I
There
mean,
are better ways to do
Philip.
those.
I mean, I may have done that a time or two, but you'll never know.
We'll never know. The
You'll
Oh,
never
really
that's so
know.
funny.
Yeah, no, you guys have said it all so well. I think I love the idea of just if you can collaborate, hopefully it's not just in a meeting with a bunch of people. I think that's part of it, right? If your culture is such that that's the only place you collaborate, you won't succeed in collaboration. Though good for you for trying it and starting it. But if people on their own can talk and have those ideas and relationships outside of that meeting, it really is, like meeting hospitality, or collaborative hospitality, how you approach each other in that. So yeah, great thoughts all around.
Yeah. I think this has been a great topic. And I think my biggest takeaway from it is just like we're all humans and remember that. And most people are not coming to the table intending to dominate the conversation or intending to not speak and sit there and make it feel like it's passive aggressive. Like most people are not doing that. They're just like responding and probably not thinking about how they're being perceived by other people or how that might come across. And so just like we're all humans here. And so, yeah, when you're observing either the quiet person or the louder person as a leader, like remember they're people and they probably have reasons why they are acting the way that they're acting and like get to know them, understand what those motivations are, understand, why they're showing up the way that they are, because that will help you lead them better. And I would also say it too, if you're the person in the meeting who feels like they're being misunderstood, whether that's, hey, I'm quiet and I don't feel like people are listening to me, I don't have a place for my voice, or I'm a louder voice and I feel like my hand keeps getting slapped. Go talk to people, help them get to know you and understand maybe where you are coming from or why, you did or said that thing that you did. And I think, you've got to be willing to get some feedback in that process too. You might need to adjust how you're doing things, but let people get to know you. Don't sit there and be smug and say, well, nobody's thinking about me or nobody thought about how that would impact me. Well, maybe they didn't know. So maybe go help them understand. So that's probably my big takeaway from this. But would you two anything you would like to add? And I did it. I said anything. But what else would you add to that?
Anything. Um, yeah, I also think that it takes intentional thought going into a meeting. I will default to my natural inclination of saying nothing if I'm overwhelmed. Like it happens. And I have had to work on saying things like, can I just have a minute? I'm processing, or I have a question about this, or, like I've had to work on doing that. I think there was recently a meeting we had where we went into it and everyone was talking and I was just like really quiet. And then I think people thought I was mad and they were like, "Are you mad?" And I was like, "No, this topic is incredibly overwhelming for me and I just don't have things to say about it." And so then I had to go back and be like, "Hey, everybody, I'm not mad. I promise I'm not mad. I'm just like incredibly overwhelmed." And I defaulted, right? I defaulted back to my natural inclination of nothingness. And I think people were a little surprised by that. I'm one of the co-founders. I can do or say what I want here, right? Like I can do anything. But I was really overwhelmed by the topic. And then people thought that I was mad. And I think we have to remember that everyone is human. Everyone has defaults. Everyone is working really hard to do the right things. And if you see someone either over communicating or under communicating, both of those things are not bad in and of themselves. We just need to like practice calling them out in a kind and gentle way, in a loving way, to hear everybody.
Awesome. Well, thanks for this conversation, Diana and Philip. And I hope this has been super helpful. But for everybody listening today, and take this back to your teams and maybe look at where do we need to acknowledge that there are voices that are not being heard in the room? Where do we need to get to know our team better and just have better conversations with the people that we work with? So thank you so much for listening. Listen to our outro, know how to get a hold of us. If you want to talk about this topic more, maybe there are some challenging personalities on your team that you're like, okay, but this layer makes that harder. Reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you about it. And as always, if you have ideas for us for podcast episodes, we would love to hear from you. So be sure to listen to that outro and know how to send us ideas. But thanks for being here. We hope we have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for listening to the People Centric Podcast. We are so grateful for you joining us every week. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. Also, feel free to share on your social media with everyone that you know. It really does help us. If you would like to contact us, I have put our information in the show notes. Please reach out anytime. We love hearing from you. We will be back next week with a new topic. Until then, be well and lead well.